You ever have one of those moments where you can feel your peace slipping, like it's running out the door before you even had a chance to say, "Wait, I need that." You wake up with good intentions, ready to face the day, and then one text, one comment, one situation pulls you right out of your rhythm. Suddenly, you're frustrated, defensive, explaining yourself to people who aren't even qualified to understand your calling. And in that moment, you realize it's not what's happening around you that's the problem. It's what's happening in you. That's where the training begins. See, nobody teaches us how to master our mind before managing our emotions. We're told to pray, to be strong, to keep going. But nobody tells us that if you don't take your thoughts captive, your emotions will take you hostage. The mind is the battlefield. It's where peace is won or lost before the fight even starts. You can't control the weather, but you can decide whether or not to stand in the rain. You can't control who walks into your life, but you can decide who stays. And you can't always control what people say, but you can control what gets to live rent-free in your spirit. This is why you have to learn to pause before reacting. That pause, that moment between the offense and your response, that's where growth happens. That's where maturity lives. That's where God can whisper before your flesh tries to shout. Because sometimes what you don't say is the most powerful thing you could ever communicate. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's saying, I'm not giving this moment permission to undo what took me years to build. Some of you have been in a cycle of reacting instead of reflecting. You're tired, not because life is hard, but because your emotions have been in charge. You let every disappointment dictate your day, every rejection redefine your worth, every rumor reshape your focus. But when you learn to master your mind, you start to recognize that not everything deserves your energy. Not every battle is yours to fight. Some things are distractions in disguise. The enemy doesn't always come with horns and darkness. Sometimes he comes through your notifications. Sometimes he comes through comparison. Sometimes he shows up in a conversation that feels harmless, but leaves you questioning everything God already confirmed. That's why you have to train your thoughts like you train a muscle. You don't get peace from one workout. You get peace from consistency, from discipline, from showing up every day saying, I refuse to think the same way I did yesterday. You want to be unbothered. Start by being unmoved. Let the storm rage, but let your mind stay anchored. Be still, not because you're weak, but because you trust. Be still, not because you don't care, but because you've learned that some things don't need your reaction. They need your restraint. When you master your mind, you learn that silence can speak volumes. You learn that stillness is strategy. I've learned that peace doesn't come from having everything together. It comes from surrendering what I can't control. It comes from recognizing that I don't have to have the last word. I don't have to defend my name in every room. I don't have to chase validation that was never meant to sustain me, because when your mind is right, your spirit can rest. When your thoughts are stable, your emotions will follow. You ever wonder why Jesus could sleep through a storm? Because he had already mastered his mind. He knew that what was happening around him didn't determine what God had already promised him. The disciples panicked because they looked at the waves. Jesus rested because he looked at the Word. That's the kind of peace I want, the kind that lets me sleep through what used to shake me, the kind that lets me rest in rooms that used to drain me, the kind that allows me to say, even if it doesn't make sense right now, I trust the one who does. There's a difference between being numb and being unbothered. Being numb means you stopped caring. Being unbothered means you care so much about your peace that you protect it on purpose. You don't deny your emotions, you just don't let them drive the car. You acknowledge how you feel, but you decide where you're going. That's what mastery looks like, not perfection, but progress. Sometimes the biggest battle isn't what people say about you, it's what you say to yourself. The thoughts that whisper, you're not enough, you'll never get past this, you're wasting your time. That's why the word says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You don't change your life by changing your environment. You change your life by changing your mind about your environment. You start seeing pain as pruning. You start seeing rejection as redirection. You start seeing delay as divine timing. Training your mind means you talk back to those thoughts. You remind yourself, no, I'm not what happened to me. I'm who God says I am. You train yourself to say, this frustration doesn't define me. This storm won't break me. This moment won't move me. Because when you train your mind, you train your peace to stay still, even when the world is shaking. It's not easy, I know. Growth never is. But every time you choose patience over pettiness, every time you choose prayer over panic, every time you choose to breathe instead of react, you're building spiritual muscle. You're becoming unbothered not because life got easier, but because you got wiser, you got grounded. You got rooted in peace, so the next time you feel that tension rising, when someone pushes your buttons or life throws another curveball, I want you to pause. Just pause, take a breath, remind yourself, I have control over what lives in my mind. I have authority over what enters my peace. I am not my emotions, I am equipped to master them, because the truth is storms don't stop because you panic. They stop because you trust, and when you trust God with your mind, your emotions will learn to follow His lead. So train your thoughts, protect your peace, and when the world tries to pull you out of character, just remember, you don't have to prove who you are when you already know who you belong to. Be still and know that's how you stay unbothered. You know, I used to think that being available to everyone was the same thing as being kind. I thought that saying yes to every request, every conversation, every emotional emergency meant I was being loving and Christ-like. But somewhere along the way, I realized that kindness without boundaries becomes chaos. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't protect your peace if you keep giving people permission to drain it. You have to learn to protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. Not everyone deserves front row access to your life. Not everyone who claps for you is clapping for you. Some people are just close enough to monitor your peace, to see if it's real, to test if your healing is authentic. And that's why discernment is so important, because peace isn't passive. It's not just sitting back and letting the world do what it wants. Peace is active, peace is power under control, peace is when you know you could respond, but you choose not to. You could fight, but you choose stillness. You could prove a point, but you decide your energy is too expensive to spend on validation. I had to learn that protecting my peace doesn't make me cold, it makes me conscious. It means I'm aware that not every conversation is healthy, not every connection is divine, and not every opportunity is God sent. Some doors are distractions wrapped in destiny's clothing. Some people are drawn to your light not because they love it, but because they want to dim it. That's why boundaries are not walls, they're gates. Gates don't keep love out, they keep peace in. You ever notice how Jesus didn't chase people? He loved them deeply, healed them freely, but he never begged anyone to stay. He kept his focus on his assignment. Even when the crowd tried to pull him off course, he withdrew to quiet places to pray. That was his way of recharging, of protecting his energy. If the Son of God needed solitude, what makes us think we can survive without it? Some of us are spiritually exhausted, not because we're doing bad things, but because we're doing good things that aren't our things. We're trying to hold people God told us to release. We're trying to fix situations that require His hands, not ours. Protecting your energy means learning to stop apologizing for resting. It means saying no without guilt. It means recognizing that peace is not selfish, it's stewardship. You are responsible for the atmosphere of your soul. You can't keep inviting confusion into your space and then complain that you can't find clarity. If you want to hear God clearly, silence the noise that competes with His voice. Sometimes God will isolate you, not to punish you, but to protect you. You'll start noticing that certain people fall off, certain doors close, certain invitations stop coming. Don't panic, that's not rejection, that's refinement. God is pruning your circle so your roots can grow deeper. Everyone who started with you isn't assigned to finish with you, and that's okay. Growth will cost you connection. Peace will cost you approval, but the exchange is worth it. When you start protecting your energy, you'll notice people calling you different, like you've changed. And you have. You've changed your priorities. You've changed what gets your attention. You've changed how quickly you let things disrupt your peace. Growth looks like not responding to everything that used to pull you out of character. Growth looks like staying calm in conversations that used to make you defensive. Growth looks like smiling not because it doesn't hurt, but because you refuse to give pain the power to lead your day. You'll realize that your peace isn't fragile, it's just rare, and anything rare must be guarded. You don't leave diamonds in the street, you secure them. You don't leave valuable things exposed, you protect them. Your energy, your focus, your anointing, those are precious. You can't let everyone handle what God trusted you with. Some people can't carry your spirit without contaminating it. Some conversations sound casual but are spiritually draining. That's why you have to check your environment. After spending time with certain people, do you feel full or empty? Do you feel inspired or insecure? Do you feel lifted or low? That'll tell you everything you need to know. Sometimes the hardest part of protecting your peace is realizing that it may require distance from people you love. And that's tough, but love without boundaries turns into resentment. You can't keep showing up for people who never show up for you and then wonder why you're burnt out. You can't keep letting people borrow your joy and never return it. It's okay to love people from a distance. You can love them, pray for them, and still recognize that being close to them costs too much. Protecting your energy doesn't mean you isolate yourself from everyone. It means you become intentional about who has access to you. You start surrounding yourself with people who speak life, who challenge you to grow, who celebrate your healing instead of competing with it. You find people who feed your peace instead of testing it. Because when your circle is right, your spirit can breathe. And sometimes the person you need to protect your energy from is you, the version of you that says yes to everything. The version that overthinks, that worries, that replays old conversations in your head, trying to figure out what you could have said differently. Let that version rest, let her breathe. You're not who you were when that pain happened. You've learned too much, survived too much to keep letting small things steal big peace. You are allowed to disconnect to recharge. You are allowed to silence your phone, decline invitations, and choose rest without guilt. The world will not collapse because you took a moment to breathe. You are not a machine, you are a masterpiece. And masterpieces take maintenance. When you start walking in this kind of peace, people might misunderstand you. They might say you've become distant or detached, but the truth is, you've just become disciplined. You've learned that not every storm deserves your sail. You've learned that quiet confidence is louder than constant explanation. You've learned that protecting your peace is the most radical act of faith because it says, I trust God enough to not fight every battle He never told me to fight, so protect your energy. Guard your peace. Don't let anyone guilt you for choosing calm over chaos, healing over habit, stillness over struggle. You're not avoiding life, you're honoring it. Because at the end of the day, your peace is your power, and you protect power on purpose. There comes a point in your life when you realize not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything needs your explanation, and not everything is meant to follow you where you're going. There's a maturity that hits when you stop chasing validation and start chasing purpose. And that's when you start to grow so deep that distraction looks small. Because distractions don't always come in the form of something evil. Sometimes they come dressed like opportunity. Sometimes they look like that conversation you think you need to have, that argument you think you need to win, that person you think you need to fix. But the truth is, not everything that calls for your attention deserves your attendance. Some things exist only to test your focus. When you're shallow in your purpose, anything can pull you. Every opinion, every rumor, every disappointment, it all feels heavy. But when your roots go deep, when you know who you are and what you're planted in, the wind can blow and you might bend, but you won't break. The deeper you grow, the quieter you become, because you learn that peace and purpose don't perform for applause. Growth is not glamorous. People see the fruit, but they don't see the fight that happened underground. Roots don't grow in sunlight, they grow in darkness. They grow where no one can see, where no one claps, where no one validates. But that's where stability is formed. So when you see someone calm in chaos, steady under pressure, it's not that life is easy for them. It's that they've learned how to stay rooted. That's what God is teaching some of us right now. How to stay planted when it feels like nothing's changing. How to stay grounded when distractions are screaming for your attention. How to stay focused when your flesh wants to prove something. Because purpose doesn't always feel exciting. Sometimes it feels like quiet obedience. Sometimes it feels like choosing to stay when you want to run. Sometimes it feels like being misunderstood while you're trying to do the right thing. When you start growing deep, you begin to see distractions for what they really are, invitations to go back to the version of you that you've already healed from. The argument that tries to pull you in, the shade that tries to get your attention, the doubt that whispers you're not ready, all of that is noise trying to bring you back to a level you've already outgrown. You have to train yourself to say, I'm not going back there. I worked too hard to get free from that version of me. There's a difference between being busy and being fruitful. The enemy doesn't mind if you're busy as long as you're distracted. He doesn't care if you're moving as long as you're not growing. Because motion without meaning drains your energy, you start to mistake activity for progress, but they're not the same. Real growth doesn't always look like doing more. Sometimes it looks like focusing on less, fewer conversations, fewer comparisons, fewer explanations. That's why it's so important to guard your focus. When you know what God has called you to do, you can't afford to get lost trying to prove your worth to people who didn't assign your purpose. They didn't call you, they didn't anoint you, they don't have the authority to validate what they didn't create. So stop shrinking your focus trying to fit people's expectations. If they can't see your vision, that's fine, it wasn't given to them. You ever notice that trees don't chase sunlight, they position themselves to receive it? That's what spiritual maturity looks like. It's not chasing affirmation, it's positioning yourself to grow where you're planted. You don't have to compete for light when you're rooted in the source. And sometimes God will remove things that used to make you comfortable so that your roots can stretch deeper. That uncomfortable space, that tension, that's not punishment, that's growth. You're stretching into a new level of endurance. And with growth comes pruning. God will cut back what looks healthy on the surface so he can strengthen what's happening beneath it. You may lose some things that look good, but that's because they're not meant to grow with you. Some relationships, some habits, some environments, they can't survive where you're going. You can't carry old soil into new seasons. It's not easy to stay focused when you feel unseen. It's not easy to stay grounded when others seem to be sprinting ahead. But hear me, God grows you at the pace that preserves you. You don't need to match anyone's timeline. You don't need to rush your process. The deeper your foundation, the higher your future can rise. That's why he's teaching you patience. That's why he's keeping you hidden. Because if he exposes you before you're rooted, the wind of attention could blow you away. Distractions will always come dressed as urgency. They'll whisper, you need to respond now. You need to prove your point. You need to post something. But wisdom says, be still. Don't let small talk pull you out of big destiny. Every time you choose focus over reaction, you're watering your roots. Every time you walk away from drama you could have participated in, you're fertilizing your peace. Every time you trust that silence can speak louder than defense, you're growing deeper. And let me say this, deep growth is lonely growth. There's a quiet that comes with being grounded. You'll outgrow conversations that no longer feed your faith. You'll lose interest in things that once entertained your insecurity. You'll find yourself craving peace more than attention. That's how you know your roots are spreading. You're no longer addicted to noise. You're anchored in purpose. Don't be discouraged when people misunderstand your silence. Some will call it arrogance, others will call it indifference, but what they don't see is that you're learning to value your peace over their perception. You're learning to grow without announcing it. You're learning that real strength doesn't need to prove itself, it just stands firm. The enemy can't shake what's rooted in purpose. He can try to distract it, but he can't destroy it. That's why his goal isn't to defeat you, it's to divert you. If he can get you to waste time proving what God already confirmed, he's already won half the battle. So stay planted, stay focused, let the noise do what it does. You stay where you are, grounded in grace, anchored in truth, rooted in peace. Because when your roots are deep, storms become background noise. You don't even flinch the way you used to. You've seen too much of God's faithfulness to fall apart over temporary chaos. What once shook you now shapes you. What once offended you now refines you. You start to realize that everything meant to distract you was actually training you to discern what matters. And that's what growth really is, knowing what to give your attention to and what to let go of. You stop chasing small battles because you're carrying big vision. You stop fighting for clarity in rooms that were never meant to understand your calling. You stop shrinking yourself for people who prefer the version of you that needed their approval. You've grown, you've stretched, you've learned to breathe through the storm instead of breaking under it. And now your peace doesn't depend on the calm, it depends on your roots. So grow deep, stay grounded, and let distractions fall away, because what's beneath you is stronger than what's against you. There's something powerful about realizing you don't have to prove yourself anymore. You don't have to clap back. You don't have to defend your name in every room where it's being misused. You don't have to explain your peace to people who thrive on chaos. There comes a point where you stop trying to prove and start choosing peace, and that's when you understand what it really means to be unbothered. Choosing peace over proving doesn't mean you don't feel the sting. It doesn't mean you don't notice what people say or how they treat you. It just means you've matured to a place where you refuse to let their behavior pull you out of your character. You've learned that every response costs energy, and not every situation deserves that kind of investment. There's freedom in realizing you can acknowledge something without entertaining it. You can hear it, process it, and still decide it's not worth your reaction. That's growth. See, the loudest clapback isn't what you say, it's how you live. It's the peace that doesn't need to perform. It's the calm that doesn't need to compete. It's when you can look at the same situation that used to break you and say, you don't have power here anymore. That's what happens when you choose peace. It's not passive, it's powerful. It takes strength to walk away from chaos when your flesh wants to fight. It takes maturity to let God handle what your ego wants to control. You ever notice that sometimes silence is the loudest statement you can make? Because silence doesn't mean weakness, it means confidence. It means, I trust that God's justice is louder than my defense. And let's be honest, there's a version of us that used to have to say something back, that couldn't let anything slide, that always had to have the last word. But that version doesn't live here anymore. That version was fueled by insecurity, not identity. When you know who you are and whose you are, you stop fighting for validation and start walking in confirmation. You learn to be okay with not being understood. You learn that people can misjudge you and you still win. You learn that you can be talked about and still chosen, because peace doesn't come from being liked, it comes from being aligned. You stop needing to fix every misunderstanding because you realize that the truth will outlive the lie. Sometimes God will let people believe what they want about you, just so he can show them later who he always knew you were. The more you grow, the more you'll be tested with opportunities to prove yourself. The more peace you carry, the more life will try to see if it's real. You'll be tempted to respond, to clap back, to set the record straight, but peace whispers you don't have to. Peace says, let them talk, let them wonder, let them miss the version of you that used to fight battles beneath your level. Because real strength isn't in the reaction, it's in the restraint. And don't get it twisted, choosing peace doesn't mean you don't set boundaries. It doesn't mean you let people walk all over you. It means you pick your battles with wisdom. You understand that not every offense deserves a defense. Some things aren't attacks, they're tests, and if you can stay calm under pressure, you'll realize that peace is a weapon. You disarm your enemies by refusing to fight their way. You frustrate confusion by staying composed. You silence gossip by staying graceful. There's something deeply spiritual about refusing to engage with negativity. Because when you fight small battles, you take your eyes off the bigger picture. You can't prove and progress at the same time. You can't defend your name and develop your purpose in the same breath. That's why you have to decide what's worth your words. Every response costs focus. Every argument costs energy. And some things are too expensive for the peace you've worked for. When you really start walking in peace, you begin to see that revenge is overrated. Proving people wrong is too small of a goal for someone who knows they're called to something bigger. You stop trying to show them, and you start trying to become it. You don't prove your worth, you embody it. You don't chase closure, you create it. Because when you're aligned with God, you understand that vindication is His job, not yours. Your job is to stay obedient. I think sometimes God withholds the opportunity to defend yourself because He wants to show you what peace feels like without validation. He wants you to see that He can fight for you better than you could ever fight for yourself. He wants you to see that He can clear your name in rooms you'll never walk into. That's why you can rest. That's why you can choose quiet confidence over loud defense. It takes humility to say, I don't need to be right, I need to be whole. It takes faith to say, I don't need to explain myself, I just need to trust that God knows the truth. When you choose peace, you stop trying to win the argument and start winning your freedom. Because peace is the prize, and once you've tasted it, chaos doesn't even feel tempting anymore. Some of you are in a season where people are testing your patience, misunderstanding your silence, and provoking your old self. And I get it, it's hard to hold your tongue when you know you could set the record straight. But remember, peace isn't pretending you don't care, it's knowing you don't have to. It's not ignoring what happened. It's choosing not to let it control what happens next. It's saying, I'm not going to ruin my future trying to prove something to people who are already committed to misunderstanding me. Choosing peace means understanding that God will fight for you when you stop fighting everyone else. He'll make the truth rise above the noise. He'll reveal what needs to be revealed in His timing. So let go of the need to perform. Let go of the urge to explain. Let go of the expectation that everyone will understand. Peace is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of confidence. It's the calm assurance that no matter what's said, what's done, or who walks away, you'll still be standing because your foundation isn't built on approval, it's built on purpose. And here's what I've learned: when you stop proving and start trusting, you stop bleeding for battles that don't belong to you. You stop arguing with people you've already outgrown. You stop seeking validation in spaces that were never meant to hold your worth. You start moving different. You start responding different. You start living in a rhythm that doesn't break every time someone doesn't believe in you. So if they doubt you, let them. If they misunderstand you, let them. If they mislabel you, let them. None of that changes who you are or what you're called to do. You are not here to prove a point. You are here to walk in peace. And peace is the proof, because the most powerful version of you isn't the one that claps back. It's the one that stays still and lets God speak louder than your defense. That's how you win without fighting. That's how you rise without noise. That's how you stay unbothered.